The sun was already burning over the empty Texas highway when Caleb Walker spotted the flashing lights in his rearview mirror. His chest tightened. He knew that feeling too well. Another roadside stop. Another moment of judgment. The old rig. Beneath him rattled with every mile, a reflection of his own wear and fatigue. He wasn't doing anything wrong, at least nothing the system could see. But when you're poor, weathered, and invisible, you carry guilt, even when you've done nothing. He pulled over without protest. No hope, no defense. Just the dull ache of expecting to be treated like he didn't belong. But this time, something was different. The trooper who stepped out didn't bark orders or flash arrogance. He looked at Caleb for a long, strange moment, like he recognized something buried beneath the grime and weariness. What followed would not be a ticket or a lecture, but a revelation. One act of kindness from Caleb's past was about to catch up with him in a way that would shift the course of his life. If you believe small actions can change everything, like, comment, and subscribe to support our stories. Join our channel for more powerful tales that will move your heart. The highway stretched endlessly beneath the scorching Texas sun, heat waves dancing above the cracked asphalt, like spirits refusing to rest. Caleb Walker, a lone trucker with a cab full of worn maps and empty coffee cups, wiped sweat from his brow as he guided his aging freightliner down Route 67. The dashboard lights flickered, like they were tired too. He wasn't running from anything, but life had taught him how quickly dignity could be stripped away, especially when your boots had holes and your plates were rusted. He was on the final leg of a trip that could save his trucking license. One last delivery, one last chance. He adjusted the rearview mirror, seeing nothing but dust and sky. His hands tightened on the wheel as a patrol car emerged from behind, sirens off, but lights flashing. A cold weight settled in his chest. Caleb had been pulled over before, but today he couldn't afford a fine or a delay. "Please, not now," he whispered. He looked down at his cracked license, the corners bent from years of use, and prayed it wouldn't be an issue. The rig groaned as he slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder, gravel crackling under the tires, like tension under his skin. Outside, the wind kicked up a cloud of dirt as Caleb stepped out of the cab. He kept his hands visible, just like he'd been taught after years on the road. The patrol cruiser door opened slowly. A trooper stepped out. Tall, firm, face unreadable behind aviator sunglasses. Caleb swallowed hard. He was used to this script. Poor man, run-down truck, automatic suspicion. He braced himself for what always came next. Judgment, humiliation, questions he couldn't afford to answer, and accusations he had no energy to fight. His only goal now was to survive the stop with his license intact. The officer walked with purpose, hand resting near his holster, but not on it. Caleb's stomach twisted. He had done everything right, lights, registration, weight check, but experience taught him that didn't always matter. "Afternoon, sir," the officer said flatly. Caleb responded with a nod and a quiet, "Yes, sir." The trooper didn't ask for papers right away. Instead, he studied Caleb's face, as if searching for something behind the tired eyes and unshaven jaw. It wasn't fear, Caleb realized. It was a mix of something else, recognition, suspicion. He couldn't tell, but it made the silence unbearable. Finally, the officer extended his hand. "License and registration, please." Caleb handed them over with practiced resignation. The man stepped back, examining them silently. Seconds stretched like hours. Caleb could feel his future balancing on the edge of that clipboard. A breakdown now meant losing not just the delivery, but his livelihood. He thought about his daughters, school fees, the overdue rent on his trailer, and the medical bill he hadn't opened yet. This wasn't just a stop. It was the thin thread his life hung from, and it was starting to fray. The trooper turned, walking back to his car. Caleb stayed, frozen, hands by his sides. His heart pounded, not from guilt but from powerlessness. He'd been through worse, but something about this felt different, personal. When the officer returned, his face wasn't stone anymore. He looked confused, almost disturbed. Did you help someone last winter? On Highway 281, a woman with a flat tire and 2 kids in the back. Caleb blinked. The memory flickered. "Yeah, I guess I did." Why? He asked, the question barely forming before the trooper's voice broke with emotion. She's my wife, the officer said. The air thickened. Caleb tried to process it, but the officer continued. She said a man appeared from nowhere that night, cold as hell. You changed her tire and wouldn't take a dime. Caleb gave a slight nod. Didn't think much of it, he muttered. The trooper stepped closer, lowering his voice. She talks about you all the time. Said you had the saddest eyes she'd ever seen. Caleb looked away, uncomfortable. The ground felt unstable now, not from fear, but from something unfamiliar. Gratitude, and it terrified him more than shame ever did. Before Caleb could say another word, the trooper turned back toward his car. Wait here, he said. The sudden shift in tone made Caleb's gut churn. What was happening? Why did the officer look shaken? And why did he tell him to wait again? Was something wrong? Had that old act of kindness opened a door he wasn't ready to walk through? Caleb looked at the horizon, the sun lowering, casting long shadows across the desert floor. He was alone again, waiting. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel invisible. Caleb stood still, arms folded across his chest, trying to hold in the anxiety rising like a flood. The wind had quieted, but inside his mind, every memory of a roadside stop gone wrong screamed louder than ever. His breath was shallow. His boots shifted on the gravel as he imagined the worst. A fine he couldn't pay, or worse, a citation. That would revoke his license. He looked back at the patrol car, engine running, silhouette of Officer Ramirez inside, head down, radio in hand. The moments dragged on like eternity, stretching nerves already worn thin. Inside the cruiser, Ramirez wasn't speaking into the radio. He was staring at the dashboard, wrestling with the storm inside him. His wife had told him about the man, but never imagined they'd meet again. Her eyes had welled up when she spoke of the quiet stranger who changed more than a tire that night. He gave her hope. Ramirez thought he'd thank him someday. But this? Now? With a badge between them and hell. The ghost of the past sitting right in front of him. He took a deep breath and opened the glove compartment, fingers brushing something he had stored weeks ago. Caleb shifted his weight, rubbing the back of his neck. The sun was dropping, painting the sky in shades of bruised orange. He hadn't moved his truck, didn't dare. Every second the trooper stayed silent amplified the unknown. Why did he ask about that night? Caleb whispered to himself. Why does it matter now? He remembered the kids, the crying toddler, the frozen hands on the tire iron. He hadn't done it for thanks. He'd done it because he couldn't. Ignore suffering. Maybe he hoped someone would do the same for his daughter someday. The door of the cruiser creaked open. Ramirez stepped out, envelope in hand, but not speaking. He walked with a new weight to his stride, like this stop had become something more than routine. Caleb tensed. "What is that?" he asked, nodding to the envelope. Ramirez didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked, "Can I ask you something?" Caleb hesitated. "Sure." The officer's voice lowered. "Do you still believe people can do good things and not expect anything back?" Caleb gave a tired smile. "I used to. I'm not so sure anymore." Ramirez nodded slowly. "That's what she said you'd say." Caleb squinted, confused. "Who?" Ramirez didn't answer with words. He handed him the envelope. "Open it," he said softly. Caleb hesitated. "What is it?" Ramirez looked at him without blinking. "Something overdue." With shaking fingers, Caleb opened the flap. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a photo. The paper was handwritten, elegant script. His eyes scanned the words. "To the man who didn't ask for anything but gave everything. You saved us. Let us help you now." Behind the note, a photo of the woman and her children smiled back at him, standing beside a new SUV. Caleb's hand trembled. "I don't understand," he murmured. Ramirez answered, "She never forgot, and when she found out I was assigned this route, she said, 'If you ever meet that man again, you'll know it's him. Help him.'" Caleb stared at the picture, then back at the officer. "This is real?" he asked, voice breaking. Ramirez nodded. "You didn't just change her tire. You changed her view of humanity." Caleb's throat tightened. His instinct was to resist. "I didn't do it for this," he said. Ramirez stepped closer. "I know. That's why it matters." The moment hung in silence, thick and sacred. Ramirez finally added, "There's more, but first I need you to come with me just for a moment." Caleb flinched. "What? Why?" Ramirez gestured toward the cruiser. "It's nothing bad. Just trust me." Caleb stared at the vehicle. He'd trusted before and paid the price, but something in the officer's eyes was different. Warm, grateful, human. He took a deep breath, sliding the envelope into his pocket. "All right," he said. "I'll trust you once." Ramirez nodded. "That's all I need." Caleb followed him toward the patrol car, each step feeling like a leap across time and pain. The hum of the highway faded into the background. At that moment, Caleb wasn't just a poor trucker facing humiliation. He was a man standing at the edge of something unexpected, redemption. But what exactly awaited him inside that cruiser, he couldn't begin to imagine. Inside the cruiser, the air was cool and quiet. Caleb sat stiffly in the passenger seat, his calloused hands resting on his knees. He couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was unfolding, something that had started long before this moment. Ramirez sat behind the wheel, fingers drumming on the steering wheel. "You ever think," he said softly, "that maybe the good we do circles back?" Caleb gave a dry chuckle. "Not in my experience. Life usually kicks harder when you try to stand tall." Ramirez didn't argue. He reached for the center console and pulled out a sealed manila folder. He handed it to Caleb. "It's not official business. Open it." Caleb looked at him with suspicion, then slowly peeled back the flap. Inside were documents, copies of Caleb's trucking records, unpaid fines, maintenance citations. He frowned. "How do you have this?" Ramirez sighed. "When I realized who you were, I did some digging. You've been one violation away from losing your license for months." Caleb looked down, ashamed. "I know. I just didn't know. How to stop the bleeding?" Ramirez nodded. "You don't have to. Someone already did." Caleb blinked. "What do you mean?" Ramirez reached behind his seat and pulled out another envelope, this one stamped with the logo of a logistics company. "My cousin works at Hayfield Freight. When I told him about you, he pulled some strings. They're offering you a full-time route, benefits. No vehicle needed. They'll supply the truck." Caleb stared, stunned. "I haven't worked for anyone in years," he whispered. Ramirez shrugged. "Then maybe it's time someone worked. For you." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with 1,000 unsaid things. For once, Caleb didn't know what to say. "You're not a ghost," Ramirez added. "You think no one sees you out here. But we do." Caleb's jaw tightened. "People like me, we only get noticed when we mess up." Ramirez shook his head. "Not anymore." Caleb's defenses began to crack. This wasn't charity. It was something deeper. Recognition. Ramirez leaned back in his seat. "There's more," he said. "This job offer? It came with one condition." Caleb tensed again. "Of course it did. Nothing's ever simple." Ramirez smiled. "They want you to train new drivers. The guy who saved my family, maybe he can teach others what the road really means." Caleb looked down at his boots, dust still clinging to the edges. "I'm not a teacher," he muttered. "I'm barely keeping myself together." Ramirez answered gently, "That's exactly why you're the right man, because you know how hard it is to keep going." The words hit hard. Caleb had always carried pain in silence. Now someone was asking him to turn it into guidance. The old instinct screamed at him to say no, walk away, reject the hand that reached out. But something deeper, quieter began to stir, a desire to matter again. "Why me?" he asked. "Why go through all this trouble for a stranger?" Ramirez's eyes softened. "Because you weren't a stranger when my wife needed you. And because the world needs more men like you on the road." Caleb pressed the bridge of his nose, overwhelmed. He'd expected humiliation that day. Instead, he was being handed a second life. "I don't know if I can live up to that," he admitted. "You already have," Ramirez replied. "Now it's just time to live it forward." Caleb exhaled slowly. The road had given him scars, but maybe it still had something left to give. Ramirez turned the engine off. You can take the job, or walk away. Either way, I wanted you to know. You weren't forgotten. Caleb nodded slowly. I'll think. How about it? Ramirez stepped out of the car. Caleb sat alone for a moment, the sun now sinking behind the hills. He looked again at the documents in his hands, proof that someone believed in him, and that belief scared him more than any fine ever could. As he climbed out of the cruiser, a gust of wind blew dust across his boots, as if the highway itself was whispering, "Keep going. We're not done yet." Caleb stood next to the patrol car, gripping the job offer like a lifeline he wasn't sure he deserved. The wind tugged at the paper as if trying to pull it away before he could accept it. Ramirez leaned on the hood of his cruiser, watching him with quiet patience. "You don't have to decide right now," he said. Caleb didn't answer. His mind was a storm, years of pride, pain, and stubborn independence colliding with this one startling moment of grace. Accepting the offer meant surrendering control, but turning it down, it meant staying in the same cycle that had nearly broken him. "I haven't worked for anyone since I left my father's farm," Caleb finally said, his voice hollow. "Last time I took someone's help, I regretted it." Ramirez nodded, understanding not just the words but the weight behind them. "This isn't that kind of help, Caleb. It's a door. You can open it or not, but it's yours." Caleb's jaw clenched. "What if I fail?" The officer didn't flinch. "Then you fail forward. That's what you did the night you helped my wife. You didn't fix everything, but you were there, and that's more than most." The conversation was interrupted by a rumble from the road. Another trucker had pulled over, smoke billowing from under the hood. Caleb and Ramirez both turned to look. A young driver stepped out, clearly panicked, cell phone in hand, pacing in circles. Caleb instinctively stepped forward, then stopped. Ramirez watched him. "That's what I'm talking about," he said. "You don't need a badge or a paycheck to make a difference. You already move when people are in need." Caleb looked at the young man, then back at Ramirez. "I don't even know the kid." "Didn't know my wife either," Ramirez replied. Without another word, Caleb jogged over to the truck. The engine hissed, and the kid was sweating bullets. "Need a hand?" Caleb asked. The driver looked up, surprised. Yeah. I think something's leaking. I'm just trying to deliver this on time." Caleb slid under the truck without hesitation, tightening a loose clamp, patching a hose with tape from his pocket. "Should get you to the next stop," he said. The kid looked at him like he'd seen a ghost. "Thank you, sir. I don't know how to repay you." Caleb just nodded. "Pass it on." He walked back toward Ramirez, brushing dirt off his hands. "You always carry hose tape," the officer joked. Caleb smirked. "Only when I feel useful." Ramirez extended the job offer again, not pushing, just holding it. Caleb stared at it. "Do I have to wear a uniform?" he asked. Ramirez raised a brow. "No, just show up, be the guy you already are." Caleb took the paper, this time without hesitation. It wasn't just a job, it was purpose, maybe even redemption. "All right," he said quietly. "I'm in." The officer smiled. "Welcome back to the road, Caleb. The right way this time." But just as they were about to part ways, Ramirez's radio crackled. A dispatch voice came through. "Be advised, vehicle matching suspect description spotted near your location. Be on alert." Caleb's body stiffened. Ramirez turned the volume down slowly. "That's not about you," he said quickly. Caleb wasn't convinced. "You sure?" Ramirez nodded. "Stay here. I'll check it out." As the officer got back in the cruiser and pulled away, Caleb stood alone again, this time with hope in his pocket, but unease in his chest. Something told him this road still held one more turn he didn't see coming. Caleb watched the cruiser disappear down the bend, its taillights flickering like warnings in the twilight. The dispatch call echoed in his mind. Vehicle matching suspect description. He glanced back at his own truck, rusted and old, easily mistaken. Paranoia began to crawl in. What if the warning was about him? He'd been profiled before. What if Ramirez made a mistake? Caleb's fingers tightened around the job offer in his hand. He had finally said yes to something. Was it all about to be torn away? The evening air turned cooler, and the shadows stretched longer. Caleb walked back to his rig, intent on leaving before more cops arrived, but just as he reached for the door, another patrol car pulled up behind him. This time, the officer wasn't. Ramirez. A younger trooper stepped out briskly, hand already hovering over his holster. "Step away from the vehicle," the officer barked. Caleb froze. "I didn't do anything," he said calmly, but his voice carried a tired tremor. "Sir, now," the officer repeated. Caleb raised his hands slowly, fear creeping into his chest, not of guilt, but of being misread. The trooper approached with intensity, glancing at the license plate, then at Caleb. "Your truck matches the description. We've had a report of a hit-and-run 2 counties over. Same model, same color." Caleb swallowed hard. "That's not me. I've been here all day." The officer didn't lower his tone. "ID, now." Caleb reached into his pocket slowly, pulling out his license, job offer, and the letter Ramirez's wife had written. "Read it," he said, voice steady. The officer took it with a scowl but paused as his eyes scanned the note. His stance softened, but only slightly. A second cruiser arrived. Ramirez stepped out and immediately took control. "It's not him," he said firmly. The younger trooper hesitated. "Sir, we're just following protocol. The description matches." Ramirez held up his hand. "I know this man. He's not our suspect." Caleb exhaled slowly as the tension began to dissolve, but the damage had already been done. That single moment, the shouting, the threat, the trigger finger, had ripped open every old wound. Caleb looked at Ramirez. "Still think the road gives back?" Ramirez didn't answer right away. He just placed a hand on Caleb's shoulder. "I still believe in people, even when the system forgets them." The younger officer stepped back, embarrassed. "Sorry, sir, miscommunication." Caleb gave a tight nod. "It's all right. I've lived in the middle of miscommunications my whole life." Ramirez led him aside. "You okay?" Caleb looked off into the horizon. "I don't know. I was 5 minutes ago." Ramirez sighed. "This won't be the last time someone misjudges you, but it might be the first time you're not alone. When it happens." That hit deeper than Caleb expected, not because it was comforting, but because it was true. They stood there for a moment, the night now fully wrapped around them. Caleb looked at his truck, old, scarred, but still running. Then he looked at the paper in his hand, the job that was still his if he wanted it. "You really think I can teach someone else?" he asked, voice almost a whisper. Ramirez didn't hesitate. "I think you already did." Silence fell between them again, but this time it didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Ramirez reached into his own pocket and pulled out a small, rusted coin. "My father gave me this when I first became a trooper." He said, "This job breaks. People, don't let it break you. I want you to have it." Caleb stared at the coin, stunned. "I don't know what to say." Ramirez smiled. "Then don't say anything, just don't stop showing up." Caleb pocketed the coin. A symbol now joined the paper and the letter, a trifecta of chances, reminders, and burdens he no longer had to carry alone. The road hadn't finished testing him, but for the first time in years he was starting to believe he might be more than just a man trying to survive it. He could shape it, teach it, honor it, and maybe even heal from it. Weeks later, the same stretch of highway basked under a gentler sun. A newer truck, branded with the Hayfield Freight logo, rolled steadily past the place where it had all started. Behind the wheel sat Caleb, now wearing a company vest and a different expression, less guarded, more focused. His eyes, though still weathered, carried something they hadn't in years: quiet certainty. On the passenger seat sat a worn leather notebook, pages filled with tips, trucker codes, and scribbled advice. His own words, preparing for his first trainee who'd be joining next week. The company hadn't just given him a job, they'd given him a voice. He was no longer invisible, no longer haunted by the weight of everything he'd done right that no one saw. Now people listened, people asked. And when they did, he didn't give them instructions. He gave them stories. Stories of missed meals, near breakdowns, lonely highways, and the night a man named Ramirez handed him more than a lifeline. He handed him back his dignity. Caleb kept the envelope, the photo, and the coin inside his glove box. Not out of nostalgia, but as compass points. Every time self-doubt crept in, he reached for those symbols, the kindness he offered without asking, the job offer he nearly refused, the coin that reminded him not to let the road break him. They weren't trophies, they were tools. He used them to rebuild. And slowly, piece by piece, the man he was becoming no longer feared mirrors, because he finally liked the man staring back. He made a habit of stopping for stranded drivers, just like he had that winter night. One stop in particular stood out. A young woman, terrified and alone on the side of the road, clutching a crying child. Caleb pulled over without hesitation, fixed the issue in minutes, then handed her a bottle of water from his cooler. She tried to pay, but he waved her off. "Just promise me one thing," he said. "When someone else needs help, don't wait for permission to stop." She nodded, teary-eyed, and just like that, the cycle continued. On his way back, he passed a familiar patrol car. Ramirez flashed his lights once in greeting. Caleb smiled, returning the gesture with a honk and a lifted hand. They hadn't spoken much since that day, didn't need to. Some bonds are built on silence stronger than words. Ramirez had done what few could. He'd looked past the surface and saw the man underneath. In doing so, he reminded Caleb that the road didn't need to be something you survived. It could be something you lived through and lived for. That night, Caleb parked at a rest stop under a sky full of stars. He sat on the hood of his truck, sipping lukewarm coffee, looking up. He didn't feel poor, he didn't feel lesser. He felt full. Not of answers, but of meaning. For the first time in a long time, he didn't dread the morning. He looked forward to it. A new driver would be joining him at sunrise, a young man trying to make ends meet. Caleb would meet him with a handshake, a smile, and a truth hard-earned. The road will test you, but it can teach you too. As he slid into the cab to sleep, he whispered a prayer, not for himself, but for every man like him still out there waiting for a break that didn't come. "Let them be seen," he murmured. "Let them be heard." The wind picked up outside, rustling the trees like applause from the heavens. And as Caleb drifted off, the hum of the engine next to him felt less like noise and more like a lullaby. He had found something rare, not just redemption, but renewal. And now, it was his turn to give it back. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel for more soul-stirring tales. Want to support our work? Join our channel as a member and help us continue bringing hope-filled stories to life. More stories like this are on the way. Don't miss our next emotional revelation.